day, like you spent so much time going to school for this skill set. Like you want to be able to then unleash that as much as possible. And you don't have to do implants. You don't have to do, Invisalign. You do what you want to do from a dental side. In the same way within vet med, and you look at from a really good, well-run practice, it's going to be in the teens as far as profit margins. I've seen practices that are significantly higher. I've seen practices that are in the 30s. I've seen practices that are high 40s. And it's just like, they are very, very niched out as far as who they're taking care of and what they're trying to accomplish. And that's incredible.
I'm Jamie O'Kane, CPA, Small Business Advanced Tax Planning and Compliance Extraordinaire. And this is the Abundant Beans Podcast, the podcast that takes my love for learning what makes people tick while digging into the good, bad, and ugly of small business ownership. We strive to give you the insight that only those in the trenches of being and working with entrepreneurs can provide.
Today on the podcast, we have Isaiah Douglas. Isaiah is a certified financial planner. I like how this is in all caps, certified financial planner, and fee-only advisor. He left a large national firm to start a solo financial planning firm in 2018 to pursue a planning approach that is dedicated to identifying ways to grow the net worth of veterinarians and dentists. In the summer of 2020, he merged with a partner, is now co-owner and partner at Vincere. Is that right?
It is. So think sincere, just with a V.
Oh,
so
Vincere. Okay, Vincere. I was going like the Italian version.
It's Latin and it totally doesn't sound like that, but everyone goofed it up. So that's the way that it's pronounced now.
Okay.
We've Americanized it.
Vincere Wealth Management. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, we've done panels together. I've been on your podcast.
And I think we did like a Zoom live event too, or like a Facebook Live or some sort of thing as well with the Vet Financial Summit. So
that's the first time I met.
Four things?
Something. Not enough yet. We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll keep getting there. We'll get to double digits before too long.
Yeah, we'll get there. So happy to have you today. Thank you for making time for us.
Yeah.
I'm giving Isaiah crap because he was mega late on accident, which is totally fine.
I was mega late and I feel guilty.
No, it's totally fine. No worries. So Isaiah, first question first. What was your first job?
My first job was at KFC in Bluffton, Indiana. And I did not work that long because I broke my arm in sports. So I broke my arm in football. And I think I was employed maybe a year, and I maybe only worked like 4 months, just because when I had a broken arm, like you don't really get workers' comp or any of those other benefits. It just couldn't work. And to have someone that's supposed to be frying chicken with one arm and the other one in a sling, they didn't really like that, so couldn't really do much.
Why, really?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was kind of anticlimactic. Does that translate into what you do right now? Your KFC?
Sure. We could use some sort of way of saying the secret recipe of the seasoning on the chicken is a way to think about investing as far as like bringing all the different ingredients together to make something tasty. I always use the analogy of chocolate chip cookies, but maybe I need to go back and switch that to the same thing as the Colonel's secret recipe, and I'll make it into some sort of investing analogy. So thank you for that.
Super brilliant off the cuff. I really appreciated that. I would have been like, no, Jamie, not at all. I don't flip chicken on a daily basis. So give us the cliff notes on your career journey.
Current cliff notes are born and raised in Indiana, farming family, doing the farthest thing from that, right? So that's kind of just a weird way to get where I'm at. It was more or less wanted to do finances because I saw kind of my family struggle from that standpoint. Bigger family. I know people had way worse childhoods, was definitely loved, got a lot of stuff from that standpoint, but saw my parents struggle with money. And I was like, I don't want to have that when I get older. So I was just naturally curious to educate myself. That ended up leading to wanting to learn about investing. And then I thought, oh yeah, financial advisor, they just do investing stuff, which is so not true. And as I learned more and more, got into that world, was fortunate enough to have a job at Merrill Lynch in Indianapolis, work with a guy that I think highly of, treated me well, got to see good experience, didn't love the big box brand approach. We could certainly dive into that, tried to keep myself out of trouble by saying negative things of big companies. But then left. I got my hand slapped enough, had enough things that I wanted to do differently And kind of the ideal clientele when I was there was people that were already wealthy, had already made it, and then they came to us to have their wealth managed, versus saying, hey, if you need advice and guidance and you're in the middle of something and you're younger, or you're starting a business, or you're doing all this other stuff, come back when you've sold it and you have some money. And then until then, like, good luck, come back.
But we're
And
not going to like help you sell it in a tax managed
Yeah.
way, or help you figure out how to sell it, or do any of that.
no, none of that. That sounds like it'd be something that'd be either too much work, open up too much exposure to liability, all this other stuff. So no, it was much more simple from that standpoint.
So tell us what all those letters after your name mean.
Yeah. So you talked about the CFP, so Certified Financial Planner, all being caps. That's their rule. So they like are really stringent around how you use the mark. And so you can do CFP and then the registered trademark, or you can type it all out, but it has to be caps with the TM.
There's a TM on there.
Yeah. So they are really big sticklers. They like beat that into your mind as you go through the initial training, like the first little section you go through. So Certified Financial Planner, I always describe it as it's a mile wide and an inch deep. You learn about a lot of different things. And you can kind of, the way that I looked at it was take CE, do different things that you find interesting, and then go to the level of knowledge and expertise and then kind of build out your niche. So for me, obviously it's kind of been around dentistry and veterinary medicine and private practice ownership, and just like the world of, dealing with student loans and just a way of trying to understand what all that comes together. But yeah, CFP to me is kind of like table stakes for anyone that's giving you financial advice. There are really great people out there that don't have CFP. So I'm not saying that means that they're not good, they're not smart, all that stuff. But for me, there's really not an excuse at this point not to get your CFP, and they may be working on it. So again, I would encourage someone, if they have someone they really like, trust, and they're not working on it, encourage them, ask them, and kind of push them there. So MBA, so that's kind of Masters of Business Administration. It was in entrepreneurship and innovation, which sounds super fancy, but it was kind of a trial thing that they were doing through Indiana University at their satellite campus in Fort Wayne. And I learned a lot. It was interesting. Basically the like capstone course of that was trying to take an idea that was developed and then pitch it to people to try to get funding. So the team that I had to work with to go through that, I would never want to start a business with them. So it was kind of like the whole time I was like, even if we got funding, like these would not be the people I would choose to go and run a business with. But it was good. I mean, it was fun. You learned a lot, and you got to talk to some people that had done, angel investing, or were, had done some things in the community in that area, as far as helping start some different businesses, or people that were running the incubator in town. And again, Fort Wayne, India is not like the hotbed of VC. So again, it was fun. It was enjoyable. And then CEPA, that CEPA, is Certified Exit Planning Advisor. So I took that course through the Exit Planning Institute earlier this year, and more or less just because there's a lot of baby boomers that are going to have needs, and that curriculum and that coursework was built more for middle market. So think like $2 million in revenue up to 20 million. But the way that I looked at it is, this is just really good information and good knowledge, but then taking a lot of the process, and they do a really great job from a process perspective of bringing that down market to kind of dental and vet, because it seems to be like you get to the end of your life and you're like, okay, I'm going to sell, versus actually understand what's the process to get there, and how do you think about that to get to a point where you understand, what you need from a wealth perspective. Like, what do you need to sell it for? What is it actually worth? And what's the potential that it could be worth? Because you can certainly sell your business at some point, right? But are you selling it for what it's actually worth? And is there the right timing, and just all these other things? So it was interesting.
That's really interesting. And I think the CPA is very similar. Like, people are like, I'm going to do my CPA. I'm like, if you want to do taxes and bookkeeping, do you really need your CPA? Because it really is that like mile wide, inch deep. Like, I probably don't use any of the knowledge I got from the CPA exam.
I bet you do.
Daily basis.
I think that's definitely one thing that, when you think about from a tax perspective, and who knows what the future holds right now with all the different changes,
so different.
But having that knowledge in at least the understanding of how it all works, I think is really important. And it's amazing how many people don't understand how the current, tax system works at all. And they're like, oh, I'm in this tax bracket, that's what I pay. And I'm like, not quite.
No, that's not how this works. Yeah. There's just so many pieces in our code that like, there's no way they could have. I was actually going through, my husband had all of our college textbooks out. He was like cleaning the basement. he had all these college textbooks out, and I'm looking at his pile. He's a mechanical engineer, and I'm looking at my pile, and I'm like, 90% of your pile is still relevant to what you do. None of this is even true anymore.
Yeah.
For me, like my pile is, no. Because it just changes so much on us. And you guys too, there's a lot of different regulatory that you guys are dealing with similarly to us. So I want to know what a fee-only advisor is. I mean, I know, but I want my audience to know what a fee-only advisor is.
Yeah. And I feel like I probably beat the drum more on fee only earlier in my career. I still think it's super important to me. It's one of the questions that, and I'm starting to see people ask it more. Like if someone comes in as like a newer prospective client, they might be like, "Oh, are you fee only?" And it's great to see that word is getting out there. But fee only just means the only compensation that we as an advisor get is what is paid from the client. So there's other aspects of the industry, and it's more of kind of the old school mantra of, oh, there's like revenue sharing, or there's some sort of commission of selling this thing, or you can win extra trips if you hit certain things, or, at a bigger bank institution, maybe it's if you open a mortgage and a credit card and you do this and that, you get all these extra little bonuses on how your payout is as an advisor. And it's like all that takes away from, at the end of the day, what people hire an advisor for is financial advice, typically, right? They just want good advice to free up things where they can either, retire sooner, free up their time, whatever. Like that's what they're hiring them for, not to have them try to like manipulate some sort of system internally to hit their little bonuses. And yeah, it's interesting to see how incentives work in environments like that. That's definitely a lesson I learned earlier on, which was interesting.
That is interesting. So the fee only advisor, the client pays you the fee, right?
Correct. Yep. So, and fee only can be a lot of different ways. I think some people hear fee only and they're like, oh, so they don't do investments. Not necessarily. Like fee only can be, I'm going to charge you assets under management. And there's a lot, that's kind of like the industry standard of, hey, we charge for the assets we manage, and whatever, fee that is.
Whatever percentage that is.
Yeah. Whatever percentage that is, that's what they charge. And there's others that we charge a financial planning fee. So like at our firm, we charge a financial planning fee and then a investment management fee, because we don't require, if someone to work with us, we're going to require the financial planning. We don't require the investment management. If they want to do it themselves, they can. And then there's others that do like just a flat planning fee. There's people that do it on a net worth basis. So I started when it was just my original firm on a net worth basis, because I like that idea of just building net worth and identifying ways to grow net worth. And that's still kind of at the core of a lot of the conversations that I have. It gets tricky from a way to, how do you scale that? How do you make it fair across the board? Because it can be way more expensive for some people. And then you start getting business owners and like, how are you going to value those businesses? Whose valuation? And it gets tricky. And that's kind of why I backed away from that. But there's so many different ways that advisors have decided to like build out their fee structure. I think the simplest thing, if I'm a client, is just asking, how do you get paid? Can you explain it? And can you be transparent around where your incentives lie? If they'll do that and that they're fee only, that's great. Like then you can decide, is there value here or not? And then you can kind of make the decision accordingly.
I like that the conversation around like, what are the incentives, and like, like I have partners that will pay me for, referrals or whatever. And I always just say, I get a portion of it. That's not why I send you to that place. Usually I usually have these relationships because they take really good care of our people, or I seriously trust these people, or they're trusted advisors for me. Generally I get a kickback of some sort, but like, I don't care about that. Like I would still send you to those people. And so I think it's a really important conversation to have with any of your advisors.
Right? Yeah. It's all about just, are you able to explain it, and do people know that that's there? As long as you're not trying to hide it. And it's like, oh, well, I only send you this person because there's this big thing. Like we have an organization that we work with where we have a revenue share with them, where it's more on kind of what my partner and some of the other people on the team are working on. It's not necessarily in dental or vet med, but it is just like, it's a way for us to have, additional opportunities for new clients and good clients. And it's, hey, when they come on, they get a portion of that revenue. So it's like disclosed and they have that conversation. So yeah, for me, and again, going back to, as long as people understand what's your incentive and how you do things, I think that is at the core of it. Not, well, if you buy this, it's this. And if you do this, it's this. And I do it. It's like, okay, that doesn't really necessarily make sense, at least for me. I don't know. But there's a lot of that still out there. And there's still good people that operate in all kinds of different channels. So it's not trying to say I am holier than thou. And I think sometimes, at least in my industry, there are people that will kind of take that, oh, I do things so much better because I do it this way. And it's like, okay, there's plenty of different ways to run different businesses. It's just, we prefer the idea of the fee only, and we think that's what aligns things the best. So,
I mean, the same. There's plenty of people in my industry who still charge by time. There's, plenty of people who charge by form. There's plenty of people who, I don't know. Like, so, there's bajillions of ways that we can create or decide what the value is of whatever our service is, and what our prices are. But it's what resonates and what makes the most sense.
Yep. And if there's no fee, there's probably something there. Like, I just talked to a veterinarian, and he was telling me, he's like, yeah, there's a handful of peers, and they were telling me they really like this place because they don't pay anything. It's free. And I'm like, so they're running a nonprofit? I was like, no, they're not running a nonprofit. So I'm sure there's some way they're making money. So for what it's worth, just ask questions.
Free is never free.
Yeah. If it's free, you are the product, just like with social media, right? Like you get ads, you get different things that come at you at that point. So if you're not paying for it, they are using you for something.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of like free CPE platforms for us. And I used to do it, like when I started my business, I used to do a ton of those, right? Because it's like, oh, it's an hour and it's free. But then I'm like getting inundated with the emails from those people, or there's a hard sell at the end, and I'm just like, well, I'm good.
Yeah.
So like us, your focus is on veterinarian dental practice owners. Why that demographic? Why the industries?
Yeah. So growing up in rural Indiana, I went to a super small high school. There was a guy that I played sports with that was a year younger than me that got accepted into IU dental school. And he basically was like, I have a ton of student loan debt, because he came from even humbler upbringings than I did. And he's like, I want to get married. I want to own a business. I know nothing about this. You do money stuff. Literally that conversation over probably 3 or 4 Miller Lights. And that was that's how the whole idea started to kind of focus in that space. And so I basically took his need and went out, and being within Merrill at the time, Bank of America owns Merrill Lynch, and they have this like practice solutions group. And so there was kind of that tie where I started, okay, let's dig in and understand what the solution set is. And so I was just trying to find other partners that would do what I couldn't do. So I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV or on the internet or any of that stuff. Right. So you need those person. You need someone that can do the real estate. You need someone that can help with, equipment and supplies. You need a CPA. You need someone to help them do a lot of different things. So it was just trying to build out those relationships. And it was like definitely old school networking in the kind of Indy metro area. And so I have a lot of great relationships, awesome people there, and just was talking at the IU dental school and trying to get involved as much as possible. And I just kept showing up and telling people that, I want to work with dentists, and I want to work with dentists of all kinds of, styles. And that's partially why I left Merrill, because I couldn't help him, right? Going back to who the original ideal client was, it was a person with 7 figures that had sold a business that will come bring it to us and we can manage. Like that was the client. He's not that client. Maybe 7 figures in debt after buying a practice and student loans and all the other stuff, right? So it's like the wrong side of that.
The other side.
Yeah, the other side. And so through that, there was a handful of professional partners that were like, hey, I'm working with this veterinarian, or would you be open to working with someone else? And I was like, absolutely. And there's a lot of similarities, I think, between the two.
There's a lot of
and that was really why I chose that, because again, going back to the CFP curriculum, it's a mile wide and an inch deep. I can't know everything. And so I joke, my partner, he knows a lot about stock options and worked and was out in the Bay Area for 7 years. And so we have some tech clients, and that's really kind of where he built his niche around that. I remember learning about stock options. I am not equipped to be a good stock option financial advisor. I would be like, nope, not my thing. I would refer that out or go find someone else that knows it. And so yeah, for Josh, like that's fantastic. For me, it was like the life stages of associate, new grad, trying to get a sustainable lifestyle, trying to figure out what this all looks like. Now that maybe I've never made this kind of money, 6-figure income, or, high 5-figure, and trying to figure out, okay, I have a lot of student loan debt. I want to do these other things. What does that look like? Moving into maybe practice ownership. And obviously that's a huge passion. Anyone that's heard me talk before is like, oh my gosh, this again. But practice ownership to me is a huge deal.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that kind of middle aspect of it is, how do you build wealth within that, and just look at what's the best use of a dollar if I'm a business owner. And it's not always, maxing your 401k. And a lot of people are like, well, that's weird. That's not what any other advisors told me. And I'm like, well, look at what the returns are. It might make sense to do that. There's plenty of years that make sense, but not all the time. And then kind of that third bucket is that transition out, which is more of the traditional financial planning of, I'm going to retire. Can I retire? And so getting a, big financial plan around retirement at 32, when I'm trying to think about buying a business, is not overly helpful, because life is going to look so different in 5 years. So it's trying to kind of align what is the need today, what can we do in the next 12 months to work towards what we're trying to build for. And then as life changes, because life naturally will, I didn't think 5 years ago I'd be doing what I'm doing right now. No way. So I know that's the same way for a lot of clients. And it's hard to be like, yep, you just do this to this to this and you retire. Like, no, it's not quite that linear. Yeah, it's lumpy. I always say it's lumpy.
Yeah, emotionally too.
Yeah.
So what are some of the most commonly missed opportunities you find in working with practice owners?
I really like HSAs, so like high deductible health plans. Again, it depends on the individual. And it's not like the huge, like this is going to save you the thousands of dollars, but it just seems natural to, usually you'll have, if it's a married couple, you'll have kind of the person that has the more traditional job, where they're, W-2, there's employee, and they have the health benefits. And there's a lot of, whether it's dental organizations or veterinary medicine, organizations that will also have health plans as well that you can then tap into. And there's some good offerings there depending on the state and if it's a national or more localized solution. But, I think the world of HSAs, just because it's literally the idea of taking a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA, you smash them together, and that's what you get. So you get the best of both worlds.
HRAs are pre-tax dollars that are never taxed.
Yeah. So HSA, health savings account, right? Tied to a high deductible health plan.
You have to have that.
And the whole idea of being able to leverage insurance for investing and tax-free income and all these other things that people try to sell on whole life, which I think is complete BS for 99% of people, you can accomplish that actually with an HSA. So that, to me, I'm always like, hey, if you like the idea of insurance doing stuff, then just use the HSA and you don't have to buy, expensive insurance at that point. Now, there are times where whole life will make sense, and we can get into that at another point, but I really like HSAs because it allows you to invest a nominal amount if you want. You can also pull it back out and reimburse yourself, use it for anything you want. So whether it's a practice purchase, a need, personal stuff, you can use it for all kinds of different things. You can just kind of bankroll those healthcare expenses, save your receipts, make sure that you have documentation of all that stuff, keep good records. As the recording today, you can reimburse yourself years later. The tax laws could change. So make sure, depending on when you listen to this, what happens. But yeah, HSAs are fantastic. The biggest thing is making sure that you have an emergency savings or have some money set aside, that if when you first initiate that HSA and you don't have a lot of money in there, you're on the hook for a bigger medical bill. And if you don't have it and you put it on a credit card, that doesn't necessarily then bode well. So it kind of ruins the whole idea. So you need to have those savings and have some stuff set in place prior, but I like that. I think just like from a retirement plan perspective, I have a lot of people that will do simple IRAs initially, just because in the term it's simple, right? Versus a 401k. 401ks, the pricing has come down, but the simple IRA a lot of times is going to then block doing backdoor Roths or other things as their income grows. And I would much rather keep that door open for people. So sometimes it's just having that conversation of, okay, what do you ideally want to save? In a perfect world, what do you want to save? We want the majority of the benefit to go to. And then is the backdoor Roth, is that something that's appealing? And you could still do it in the future. You could have the simple open for a couple of years and then roll it into a 401k. That's great. You can do that to kind of bury it. But I don't know. Sometimes I just think people gravitate towards the simple too quickly without looking at some of the other options. So I mean, very specific, I guess, example, but I feel like it's been on my mind with several discussions recently.
No, I agree with that. I think the other overused one too is the SEP IRA. People will be like, well, I can put more in the SEP, so we'll just do the SEP.
Yep.
But you're right, it does block that whole back door open.
Yeah. And so it just depends, like, hey, there's going to be trade-offs, and it's not saying it's right or wrong, one versus the other, that this one is the same thing that we joked before we hit record about, LLCs versus S corps. It's not always this is the right answer. Like it's going to be a little bit more nuanced. There's a little bit of gray here and there. So it's trying to have that conversation. And sometimes with spouses, it's like, oh, well, one can have it open, one can't. Okay, let's balance it. And then we'll get back to this in the future. But yeah, I just think investing back in your business a lot of times. I mean, I show a number of different slides and conversations with presentations like what's a dollar worth reinvesting back in your business. So on the dental side, Heartland Dental, after all doctor comp, what they expect to make on a practice is 24%. That's a heck of a lot better than what you can make investing in the stock market. And a lot of times, and a lot of dental practices that are run efficiently are much higher than that. So if I think about where's the best place to put a dollar, if you're not completely at capacity, marketing and finding a good marketing partner, again, that's not anything that we're doing, right? So it's easy to be like, hey, you should actually put this back into marketing and spend some money. Or, outfitting another op, what's that going to cost? Okay, well, let's go spend, $35,000, $40,000, but sounds great. I've had clients that went and took implant courses. So let's go spend $25K. But I would use the example of the school, but for those that are outside the state of Indiana, it wouldn't make any sense. But there's a really, really expensive high school in Indianapolis where one of my clients, she was like, I've sent 2 kids through there and 2 kids through IU, and I'm tired of sending all the money to the specialists. I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna get outfitted to do that because it's a great return on kind of what that investment looks like. So at the end of the day, like you spent so much time going to school for this skill set, like you want to be able to then unleash that as much as possible. And you don't have to do implants. You don't have to do, Invisalign. You do what you want to do from a dental side. In the same way within vet med, and you look at from a really good, well-run practice, it's going to be in the teens as far as profit margins. I've seen practices that are significantly higher. I've seen practices that are in the 30s. I've seen practices that are high 40s. And it's just like, they are very, very niched out as far as who they're taking care of and what they're trying to accomplish. And that's incredible to see that kind of profit margin. So the average profit margin of a US business, and this is from Biz Equity, it's probably 2019 study, it's like 10%. So even a vet practice is, so that takes everything together. And you got to think like restaurants,
restaurants are the worst.
And so you're taking like the average, and averages can be deceiving, but dentistry and vet med are both very profitable, very resilient businesses. And saw that COVID, seen that great financial crisis. We've seen that all kinds of other times throughout the course of history, that's not where people are going to just stop going. Now, are they going to stop going for elective stuff, cosmetic cases in dentistry or big surgeries in veterinary medicine? Maybe they're going to say, you know what, I'm going to wait. But man, if 2020 taught us anything, it's like there is a really robust market for both. And there's a reason why private equity continues to come into both. And you see those valuations go up higher and higher. It's not because they're going to go lose money. It's because there's a lot of really strong fundamentals for why both are doing well.
I agree with that. And there's a lot of options too for increasing profits. And, we were just talking to one of our startups about laser therapy. That's kind of on their horizon. And they're here in the Denver area. I would just go over like gangbusters, I am sure.
Yeah.
Because we're like, oh, there's a new thing we can do. Let's do it. That's how we work here.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really important on that point as well to think about knowing yourself and being self-aware. Like there are older doctors that I know that will spend money on new equipment and then it just is very expensive from collecting dust. And that's not great. So it's not great to go spend, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on something that's going to go collect dust and not do a lot for you just to get a tax write-off.
Yes. That's one of my soapboxes.
So don't do that. But if it's like, oh, I can actually see how this is going to work. I'm going to train my team. We're going to build it into our processes and we're really going to run with this thing. Let's do it.
I know my price. I know how I'm going to make money on this thing. Sure. Then buy the equipment.
Yeah. If you can't explain it to me because I don't have the clinical knowledge, like I always ask, like, just explain it to me. It's like, I'm just Isaiah. I'm the dumb non-doctor, but explain to me how this is going to work
No,
and how
totally.
you're going to be able to monetize it. And then let's go from there. And that's a great way for me to learn too. It's like, oh, that's cool. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I know. And that's how I am too. People are like, well, I'm gonna buy this equipment. I'm like, why? Because it's the end of the year.
Well, I saw in this Facebook group that I'm in that people are saying I should use this thing, this section 179. What do you think?
To buy something for someone section 71. Really?
Yeah.
So do you need those things?
Yeah.
Well, but I want to save the tax dollars. Okay, so your effective tax rate is 25%. You want to pay 100% and save 25%. How about we don't use that? And let's use that cash for something else, unless you have a plan.
Yeah.
Or you're replacing something.
Yeah. And there, a lot of times it's probably there are plenty of areas that you could spend money to use that. It's just not always the big fun ticket items. It could be other things that you're like, oh yeah, I don't want to upgrade this computer system or get more efficient on this or that. Like, that's not the fun thing. I want the new laser or the new, I don't know. Again, I'm going to show my ignorance when it comes to all the different equipment in different industries, but like, yeah, there's just so many different
Ultrasounds.
Yeah, ultrasound's good. That's one that just came up recently. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know most of these things do.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a veterinarian explain to me some of the equine stuff she was getting, and she sent me pictures. I'm like, thank you. Now I really get it. Because she just explained to me on the phone. I'm like, okay, I think I get it. She's like, here, I'm gonna send you some pictures. I'm like, oh, got it. Totally makes it. She's like, yeah, this is so they don't like crunch my arm and break my arm. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. All right. That's important. You should probably spend money on that.
I mean, I grew up in human med. My mom ran a bunch of purchases, and then I'm also a birth doula. So I think I know more than your average bear when we talk about medical stuff, and it doesn't squick me out at all. But like, still I'm kind of confused a lot of the time too.
Yeah.
So you kind of already answered one of my questions, which was how can practice owners grow their most significant assets more strategically? So you talked about putting money into practices.
Rural practices. There. Let's talk about that.
Rural practices.
Go where the competition's not.
Yeah. Interesting.
If I wanted to be entrepreneurial in both dentistry and vet med, I would look to roll up rural practices that are not too far out of metro areas. Because as you look at consolidators or DSOs that are scooping up all these practices and spending a ton of money, they're buying multi-doc practices a lot of times or highly profitable practices. And the reason they don't go rural is sometimes it's like this single or 1.5 doctor in vet med, or it's just the maybe sleepier dental office that's not doing as much. But if you can kind of combine those and then lump them in, you'll get a much higher multiple. But you have to be the right person to want to do that. It has to be that I love the business side, not as much the clinical side, because you're not going to be able to be the doctor for all of those businesses. You're going to have to hire associates. You're going to have to get into management, and then you can still be involved. But I think that's a super opportunity because then it allows someone to come in and buy a lot of different practices, and without the lead doctor that's made all that happen, like it is a legitimate business at that point where you have employees that are running those businesses. It's not the doctor that's there. So if you are the owner, but you're not the one, drilling on the teeth or taking the exams for the, the pet, like that allows you to then have enterprise value. So I think there's a good opportunity. And even if you just want to have one practice, you want to live, there's no shame at all of just living the simple life, buying a more inexpensive practice that you can afford that's smaller and then growing it and then finding, another associate or a private practice buyer to buy it. That's great. I love that. But it's just really hard to compete in kind of metro areas with the price tags that on practices, unless you're really buying something that has a lot of warts and issues. And there's still opportunities there, but you're going to still be competing against a lot of other people versus being maybe one of the only specialty clinics, or maybe we're going to do weird hours and be the only ER in an hour. Like, okay, you're going to get a lot of business naturally because you're just the person.
You will have to be open.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah.
But also the numbers I've seen on rural practices, their labor costs are generally less.
Yep. Generally less depending on the areas. So Indiana has some parts of the state that has like an Amish population. So they'll pay in
Mm-hmm.
cash. So you don't have to worry about insurance from a dental perspective. So for those that are worried about dental insurance, like that's a super opportunity to look at membership plans or being fee for service. It's hard to make that switch. I know a dentist that's looking to buy a practice, and a younger female dentist came in the area and bought a practice and switched it all to fee for service and lost a lot of patients, but she's going to kind of take that hit to then take a step forward. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But again, having some sort of strategy behind it. One of the interesting things around going back to that SEPA training, thinking about exit strategy and exit planning, it's really just good business strategy. How do you drive the value of that business higher? And it's just making decisions. And you can have, all these different things that you want to do, and then just try to be strategic with what are the ones that are most impactful today, and what can I do without burning myself out and driving myself nuts. Because it's great that you have 10 things, you try to do 10 and you get none done, and you're like, oh my gosh, my hair's on fire and I can't make this work, and I'm too stressed out, I don't think I want to do this practice ownership thing. It's like, well, because you've set yourself up to fail. Like, focus on one thing, get good at that, and then move to the next. And then if you feel the momentum of that, then add more. That's great, but you don't have to. You're not going to be able to do it all in 1 year or 1 day or 1 week or 1 month. It takes time.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think, finding those areas of focus of like, how are we going to grow this time? Or are we growing this? I think that's huge, and making sure that whatever, you are putting your focus on or creates, is going to create dollars on the back end. It might be scary though. Those changes are hard. Actually, I was talking to Laura, who did our website, and we did headshots today, and I was like, hey, I hopped into your calendar to schedule a strategy session, and there was like, I could pay. I was like, that is awesome. And she's like, I know. I was like, you're kind of slow in the uptake. She's like, but why am I slow in the uptake? She's like, that's something I'm working on, right? Like, if something feels like a good idea and it feels like something that resonates with you and works for your business, just implement it. Like, it just needs to happen. Like, the slow roll of some of this stuff, and the slow roll that I watch accountants roll out like their new fee structures, and like, it's so painful. It's painful for everybody when we do things like that. So as a business owner, like, being 100% in on whatever those changes are you want to make, and like, just do them and like rip the Band-Aid off. And then do the next one.
Yeah. And make sure your team understands what's going on and get them bought in as well. And don't be like, oh yeah, we think this might work and this is a great idea. Like, you have to tell them this is the reason why. And then you also have to understand. And one of the things I wanted to almost go back to and think about that you brought up earlier was like ways to be better and invest in your business, all of this stuff. I just think communication from being a clinician, communicating with your team and understanding the dynamics of the people that you have on your team is so important. And the doctors that are able to communicate and articulate things well to their team and have that consistent message will make it so much better long-term for the growth and revenue. And that seems really simple, but like just having good communication skills and like learning about just communication in general, the words that you use, how you position things, how your team positions things, how they act. And again, depending on where you're at and who your kind of ideal client is, patient, make sure that it's a representative of how the people are communicating. And then also, there's nothing wrong, and sales is not a dirty word, because you have to make revenue. And so if you're a communicator and you're explaining all the benefits of why they should do something, you are technically selling, but you're also just helping them solve a need that they have. And if they're open to it, they're going to do it. And if they aren't, that's totally fine. But at least be able to articulate and explain and communicate well, I think goes a long way, because you can be the best clinician in the world, and if you can't communicate with another human, not going to be great. And I think especially in vet med, hearing, well, I got into this for the pets. I'm here for the animals. I'm not here for the people. Well, all those pets are connected to a person, and until the pets are the one paying the bills, like, you got to deal with the people. So I'm sorry, but you have to.
That's actually funny, because there's parallels in the doula community. It's like, I'm here for the babies. I'm like, birth has nothing to do with the baby. Like, I can one hand the number of babies I held in births. It's not for the baby, the parents, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my job as a birth doula, was to doula the parents, not to doula the baby. The baby's going to do its thing. It's going to come out at some point. So that's actually really interesting. It's an interesting take on, we have to communicate with our team. One of the big things that, I find that is so impactful too is just creating those systems, right? Like pricing systems or whatever the systems are, and like explaining like this streamlines this for everybody, or, just makes everything transparent for everybody, including the client and you and everybody else. Those are some of the things that I tend to find are super helpful too. Like if we have a plan and we know where we're doing the plan, and all we have to do is implement the plan, and everybody is like, oh, okay, well, thank you for spelling this out for me. And it's easier to have buy-in when it's like, okay, it's all laid out. We know how this is going to work and how it's going to impact us, and it's all going to be good.
And knowing how your team is wired, again, what is the benefit to one versus the other is going to be very different versus just saying, I'm going to communicate, this is the benefit and everyone's going to get it. Well, you might have to slightly tweak that communication style for each person to explain to them why it's a benefit and why they need to embrace it. Because if you get them to buy in and do it, they're the ones that are going to run with it. And yeah, systems and processes are fantastic. And that's part of why I merged. Like financial planning, like, oh, that's great. And that's what I do. But like the internal systems in our business and just thinking about all of that, it's never been something that I love doing, right? It's like you have to do it versus having people on the team that can help. And I think it's the same way when you're a business owner, like you have to figure out, if that's not you, who on your team or who outside from a professional partner can you bring in to help you think through that strategically and get things done. And also, if you're going to pay for something, think about what is an hour of your time worth. And if you're spending this much time doing this thing, how can you take that and either get back more time so you can work and produce more, or go and hang out with your family or friends or whatever it is that you want to do? So what's your time worth? I think that's an easy way to come back to, when should you outsource stuff? When should you retain it? And how do you go hire people? So
the question also is, how much do you want your time to be worth?
Yes. What is it today? Not enough, probably, for most people. They're going to say, oh, I wish I made, this amount, right? That would be great. Okay. How do you get there? Well, maybe not micromanaging people and hiring people that can go do things. And then you can free yourself up to do the high, priority task, or the high, production, or high, volume, not high volume, but, high price point type of things, and focus on that work versus the things that it's like, oh, that's a $20 an hour type of job. That you went to school for 4 years for that? No, you didn't. So go do something different.
Well, that's it. Like whoever's making the $20 is probably way more capable of doing that thing.
Yep.
As well.
Absolutely.
There's things I don't do in my business. I don't do my bookkeeping. I don't do payroll because I have other things to do. And I can't preach this to my business owners without being the same.
Yeah.
Just because I'm pretty darn good at both of those things doesn't mean I should be doing them.
Yep.
It's not the highest and best use of my time, nor is it the highest and best use of any of my clients' time. That's just how I practice what I preach. But also, it wasn't getting done.
That's important.
Full disclosure, bookkeeping was not getting done. My bookkeeper hopped in to finish some year-end stuff. She's like, you haven't reconciled in a year and a half. And I'm like, I know. Here you go. Here's the statements.
Have fun.
I was like, well, I know it all ties, but it's just it's all categorized. I was like, yeah, see, I'm good at categorizing. I'm going once a week. Give up the stuff. That's the big thing. Give up that little stuff. All right. I want to talk about Bitcoin, and I'll get you out of here. Deal?
Yeah. How long do you have?
I'm just gonna let you roll with this one.
Yeah. Oh man.
So you're pretty big into Bitcoin.
I am.
All right. Why? How? Who is a good fit for? And what kind of mindset should we have around Bitcoin?
All good questions. So the first is, what is Bitcoin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Bitcoin is just better money. That's the easiest definition that I can give someone. It's just better money. Mm-hmm. And so I use a lot of the same quotes, but I think the best quote that I've found around kind of what is Bitcoin is from Lynn Alden and her 3 reasons for investing in Bitcoin. So she wrote it in April of 2020. She goes, although it has no industrial use, it is scarce, durable, portable, divisible, verifiable, storable, fungible, saleable, and recognized across borders, therefore has the properties of money. The last part right here is really important though. Like all potential money though, it needs to have sustained demand to have value. So money has taken so many different shapes and sizes over the course of history. It was seashells, raw stones, agri beads, which were called like slave beads, which was a big part of like the slave trade. You had gold for a lot of years. That was something that was there. Money is just basically anything that's going to help people be able to transact. Like it is solely there to be something that allows you to specialize in what you do and trade with me. And we have the same unit of measurement. And so you want something that is easy to measure and easy to verify and understand. Like it gives us an instrument to compare things. So that's what Bitcoin is, right? Bitcoin is just better money. It's digital money. Everything is digital today. So why not have digital money? And then the next question I'll probably have to be reprompted. So that's the initial piece of it.
Why? So it was, what is Bitcoin? Why should we use, or like, I guess really the question is, what should we be using Bitcoin as like what we transact with, or is it an investment?
Yeah. So today, the way the tax laws are written, it is not something to transact with, in my opinion, because it is going to kick off what they call a capital gain each time you would use it for a purchase. So
Agreed.
those laws need and should be changed. There are some people that are in positions in the federal government that are Bitcoiners, right? So Cynthia Lummis is probably the most famous one from Wyoming. Warren Davidson from Ohio is another one. So Cynthia is a senator. Warren is a he's a representative, I think. Check that. But basically, why? So if you look at the supply of US dollars and you look at the value that the US dollar is held, to me, that is like the critical component and like what makes good money. So Bitcoin is better money because it is far, far, far superior than the US dollar. So the US dollar is what they call like fiat currency, which means it's backed by nothing. Technically, the US dollar is backed by the full faith of the federal government, which is backed by the military, which is backed by other things. There's a fantastic article written by Alex Gladstein around the petrodollar, and it just really opens your eyes around some of the stuff that's happened to control and how the US dollar has become the world's reserve currency, which is the world runs on US dollars. And the world runs on US dollars because of the deal that was struck back in, I think, the 70s with Saudi Arabia to make sure that all the oil that they sold was sold in US dollars. This is going like way down rabbit holes. So think about that. And there's a really good piece and I can have you linked to it, but I think people should read that or listen to it if you have any interest, because it helps really clarify why is the US dollar kind of the world's reserve currency. But what it is today is it's not backed by gold. It used to, that changed in the 70s when Nixon basically said, nope, you can't redeem it for gold anymore. So fiat money has no intrinsic value. It only has value because the government maintains its value or because parties engaging in exchange agree on its value. So every fiat currency has failed for existence. The oldest fiat currency is the British pound sterling. So it's 317 years old. And it was originally 12 ounces of silver. It is now worth less than 0.5% of its original value. US dollar, monopoly money, 1935, has held its value more than the US dollar. So you just look at all these things, and holding dollars today in your bank account for purchasing power, you're losing on average about 6% per year, going back to 1980. If you look at the money supply growth, everyone knows what happened in 2020. And again, right or wrong, whatever your political opinions, whatever you think was the right decision, the amount of creation of money was $5 trillion. If the United States taxed 100% of profits for every business in the United States in 2019, it was 2.25 trillion. So raising taxes is not going to solve this issue. It's a spending problem. And we are way, 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 way over our spending problem. If we were a company, if we were a business, if we were a household, we'd be bankrupt. So to me, that is why Bitcoin matters, because it protects your purchasing power. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. About 89% of those have already been issued in the marketplace. The only way to reflect demand in Bitcoin is through the price. The way that new dollars are created is all based on what the Federal Reserve and the government decides and no one knows when or how they'll make those changes. Like, it is purely at their discretion. And to me, I would much rather have a money that is decentralized, it's consensus based. So anyone and everyone is treated exactly the same. So if you have 0.0001 Bitcoin, which you can buy, $5 worth of Bitcoin on Cash App, or you can have, 100,000 Bitcoin like MicroStrategies and Michael Saylor. Like, you can have, and you get treated the same. Versus with the US dollar, like, if I don't know how to invest well and I'm just going to my job and I'm working, I save it in the bank, I'm losing every year that money. How am I ever supposed to retire? And so you want money that's just not going to lose its purchasing power. And so for me, that's kind of the why behind it. And I know that's a really long answer. And my encouragement to anyone around Bitcoin is, like, it is just something that takes time to get. And you can read an article that comes out on CNBC or somewhere else, and they're going to say one thing, but it's like, you really need to dig in and try to learn about this. And so it is without a doubt, and I've said it multiple times, it's the story of this decade. The adoption of Bitcoin is the story of the decade. I think it's really, really, really important that people pay attention.
How is Bitcoin backed?
So Bitcoin is backed by what they call proof of work. So what proof of work is you'll hear people, and this is kind of the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that comes out around Bitcoin. They'll say, hey, it's going to boil the oceans, it's going to destroy it, uses so much energy, all this other stuff. So right now, if you put Christmas tree lights out, the United States, with their Christmas tree light usage, uses more energy than the Bitcoin network. So until you're willing to turn off all your Christmas lights, like, that argument's null and void. Also, if you look at the gold mining industry, it uses more energy and is more destructive to the environment than Bitcoin. In the current banking system, if you include all of the stuff that goes on with that, it's way more energy intensive. So Bitcoin proof of work is super, super important as far as understanding how Bitcoin is backed, because you'll hear people that'll say, well, Bitcoin's not backed by anything. But the way that Bitcoin transactions and the way that new Bitcoin come onto the network, so how they're issued, is you have Bitcoin miners, right? So the Bitcoin miners, they're solving these equations, they're competing to get paid in Bitcoin. They have to have energy input to run the machines. And so that is the proof of work. That's the sweat, right? So if I'm going to go and I'm going to try to go get, big and strong in the gym, I have to put in my work, right, to get the muscles. It's the same thing in Bitcoin. Like, you have to go in and expend energy and hope that you get the reward. And there's lots of people competing. So it is a free and open market. And the goal is that to drive down energy costs, if that's your biggest input, I want renewable energy. I want energy that is cheap. So actually, Bitcoin is the key to a green energy movement around the world. If you really
run those mining servers.
Yes, exactly. Because you're just helping then secure the monetary system of the world. And I didn't publish anything. No, I shared an article that was really good. It was about, like, checking your privilege on Bitcoin, because you look at around the world, there's a lot of countries where they have inflation that is out of control, where people are taking wheelbarrows to go get, like, chicken and bread, right? So Bitcoin still solves all those issues where it treats everyone the same. So the idea that the world could have one decentralized, anonymous founded, no one controls it, it's for the people, by the people, like, that's the most American style freedom thing that's out there. So to me, it's like, Bitcoin is built for a digital world. And yeah, so I know that's going off tangent.
No, I love it.
It's proof of work. So just think about, you have to sweat to get something. There's no magic pill to get fit. And that's kind of my issues with some of the other cryptocurrencies, and why, people refer to those as shit coins, is because they're moving to either proof of stake or other things which are similar to the idea of, if I have more, I have more power, I have more voting rights. And that's just not fair. And that's not a good way to do it. And so proof of work is really important. And there's a lot of negative things that come out around the energy usage. The development of our civilization is all around energy consumption. We need it to consume energy to continue to develop and grow. So that's really important.
Interesting. Bitcoin's on blockchain though, right? Or are they all on blockchain?
Yeah. So if you think about Bitcoin, it's Bitcoin, the asset, Bitcoin, the network, and then the blockchain is just basically the ledger or recording movements around. I always use, like, the Jurassic Park version of, like, the mosquito or whatever that gets into the amber and it fills over. Like, that's the idea behind it. If you've never seen Jurassic Park, then it's a terrible movie. But, it basically is locking that in for all of time, and you can't change it. So it's immutable. And I think that's a really important thing around Bitcoin, is once you send it, there's no, like, oh, recall, oops, I made a mistake. like, hey, tell my bank to cancel that transaction. Like you can't. So it's done. So it's final settlement, which is really important. That also allows it to be something that can't be censored. And I think that's really important too, when you think about freedom and you think about, doing things, and people are like, well, I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm not doing anything bad. Well, you have governments around the world or people in power sometimes that will be like, oh, well, this party is, trying to take power from me. Like, I'm just going to shut off their bank accounts. And that happens. And again, we're spoiled in the United States, but even from a United States perspective, if you want better money and you want something that can retain its purchasing power over time, Bitcoin is something that, yes, it's volatile, but what's the time length that you're going to measure that by? If you need something in the next month or 3 months, I'm not going to tell you put your money in Bitcoin, right? But if you're thinking, I want to preserve this for the future, for something that is longer, if I hold cash, I'm signing up to lose about 10 to 15% in the current environment that we're at. So I can fail slow, which maybe feels better, but it's still not a better outcome.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's something that I'm obviously, like, we've had this conversation a couple times now. And I just find it so interesting. And I know there's just a ton more to learn about how to use it and how, but there's entire industries that run on Bitcoin in the US.
There are a lot of businesses that are starting to be developed, and the ecosystem is insane. What is being done? If I didn't do what I'm doing now, and I still get to talk about Bitcoin, so it still feels that kind of that need, because I can talk to people about it, and I do think it's going to play an impact in small business ownership, because as Bitcoin grows, and if we do see a tax law change, one of the interesting things about Bitcoin is the way that it kind of scales. So there's like this base layer, which is like Bitcoin and the blockchain. The second layer is something called Lightning. But everyone will talk about, well, I can't pay with Bitcoin for my coffee because it takes 10 minutes to go through a block. Well, Lightning, it allows for instant settlement in a trust minimized way. So it's not as secure as the bottom layer. But if I'm spending $5 for coffee, I don't need it to be like, Brink's truck secure the same way, where it's okay to have, maybe not as much security, but it's still way more secure than a lot of other opportunities there. But you think about how many small businesses have, a little Square reader or have these other things that are eating those credit card fees every time. If we would move to a Lightning network, the cost to send that is maybe a fraction of a penny or a penny. And that is paid by the person sending it. So if I'm paying for my cup of coffee at my favorite local place in Noblesville, instead of them having to eat that $2.99 fee on my $5 cup of coffee, now they can charge the full amount and they get the full amount. Is that going to lower or raise prices? Probably they can probably lower the same or lower. And so the thing with Bitcoin is we're so caught up in this world of prices always have to go up because of inflation, because we create more money. Bitcoin could actually be an environment where prices could go down.
Crazy. I actually was at a business.
Blows your mind.
I was at a business about 6 months ago. And you give them your card, like your credit card, and in dollars, and they convert it to Bitcoin, and then you get your receipt in Bitcoin. I'm not sure it was Bitcoin. But it was cryptocurrency. Yep. And I was like, that was cool. And my fee was like a penny or two.
Yeah.
I think. Or like there was a conversion fee or something. And I was like, it was like $1. And I was like, that was really cool. I actually kind of wish I would have kept that, because I was like, this is the new future.
Yeah. So like I could send you money right now if we had the same app. Like there's different, ways to do that. We could send Bitcoin on this call by reading a QR code across to, a Zoom call, and we could be that around the world, and it can get there like that in a second, which is amazing. And you don't have to wait for banking hours. You're not paying for all the transaction fees, especially for clients or people just in general, anyone, right, that has family back home they send money to. And I have several people that, they support family back home, and, they're first generation and they're here and doing a lot of, wonderful things, but they still have family that they're sending money back to, and the fees on that are insane. And so for me, that's another great solution for that. And again, Bitcoin is an onion. Bitcoin is an onion, right? There's so many different layers to it. So we could talk for hours on it, but I know we're not going to. So, but I would just tell people to explore it. Don't write it off. Don't write it off because you heard someone say something that is probably not well thought out and haven't spent the time on it.
Yeah. I think with a lot of stuff that you deal with and I deal with, people have a very surface layer understanding of these things. That's not right. Or I don't know why that person is. All right, awesome. So before I ask my last question, what is the easiest way to find you?
I would say the easiest way to find me is probably LinkedIn. If you want unfiltered, tons of Bitcoin content, you can go to Twitter. That's probably where I'm a little bit more expressive at times.
Okay.
On Instagram as well, although I'm probably the worst millennial of Instagram. So I would say LinkedIn is probably where I share the most interesting content. And then for those that are out there, I have a podcast for veterinarians called the Veterinarian Success Podcast, and have just started a dental podcast with a co-host called Dentistry Uncut. Similar ideas of kind of interview style. If you like,
if you like this,
I'm just trying to keep up and get episodes out like Jamie is. So that's the easiest way. Feel free to reach out, ask questions, and no question is like a really hard question from that standpoint. Like just ask what you want to know.
Yeah, and we'll drop all links on the like we do. Awesome. What is the one piece of advice you would give a new practice owner?
I would tell them to continue to invest in your people. It's really hard to find good people. And if you have to take a risk of maybe paying slightly more for someone that's really good, you're going to build loyalty and make sure that they know you care. And there's easy ways to do that in just being genuine with them and being open. But at the end of the day, you make the decisions. You can't let other people run it. And if I'm a new practice owner and someone's been there for 20 years, be like, hey, that's great. That's how the old doctor did it. I also have, the student loans I got to pay and this other stuff. We are going to do it this way. Like, I want you to be here. I want you to be involved. But if it's not the right fit, then I have no problem saying, see you later. And just getting the right team is so important. It'll make your life way easier and it'll make your business so much more productive. So I think it's getting your people right.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. This was a blast. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening or watching. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or wherever you prefer to listen. If you learned something and found some useful information to apply to your business today, please consider giving us a thumbs up and a review. Until next week, be abundant.